Welcome, those of you who are joining us. We will begin shortly. We're just waiting for participants to enter the Zoom meeting. So we'll begin shortly. So as people are joining us, I will begin with introductions. My name is Ksenia Kibizinski, and I am co-director of the Petro Jacek Program for the Study of Ukraine at the Center for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies at the University of Toronto. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar on what is the role of humor during the war. And to help answer this question, we are joined by a variety of specialists. We have a perspective from a curator to a historian, a literary studies scholar, and to cultural historians. I'm going to introduce the speakers in the order that they will present, and then I will turn the floor over to them. So we will begin with Anna Rakityanskaya, who is librarian for Russian and Belarusian collections at Harvard University Library. Her professional interests include creating, describing, and curating collections of ephemeral and non-traditional materials. And she is actively involved in collaborative digital collecting and archiving projects, most recently with a focus on Belarus and Ukraine. She is a project partner in Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, which is an initiative that uses crowdsourcing to collect a variety of material, including Ukrainian war memes. Anna will be followed by Charles Shaw, who is assistant professor at the Department of History at the Central European University in Vienna. He is a social and cultural historian of the Soviet Union with a particular focus on Central Asia, but has branched out into other areas of inquiry, such as humor and satire during the Second World War. And he just recently had an article on humor and satire in Ukraine and Russia in a historical perspective that was published in Slate. His other articles have appeared in the appendix, Kritika, Central Asian Survey, and are forthcoming in other publications. He will be followed by Olha Khometa here in Toronto, Ph.D. candidate in the Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures. Olya is a graduate of the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy in Kyiv, Ukraine, and is very active in community and literary circles, organizing readings on contemporary Ukrainian diaspora and emigre literature. And finally, we will close with two co-panelists, Olena Pavlova and Maria Rohoja, both professors of ethics, aesthetics, and cultural studies at the Taras Shevchenko University in Kyiv, Ukraine. Olena is presently associated with the Institute of History at Humboldt University in Berlin. Maria is in Ukraine. And both of them are coordinating a project on the perception of war in Ukraine from the point of view of cultural history. So with that, I turn over the mic to Anna.
Thank you, Ksenia. Thank you. So let me share my screen. Can you see the presentation? All right, thank you. So thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. It's an honor to participate in it. My work with memes is a result of my year-long volunteer engagement as a curator of the Sucho memes collection. And this is the website that has our memes, that hosts our memes. This is an online archive of Ukrainian war memes. And it is a project of saving Ukrainian cultural heritage online, or Sucho. From the very first weeks of the invasion, it became obvious that war memes are produced and shared on social media in massive quantities. They discuss the war from various angles. They offer commentary on the war events, on the diplomatic work, on the civilians' experience, on the economic effects of the war, and even memes themselves are sometimes subject of memes. And so in Ukraine, the meme production seems to be conducted on a systematic basis. There are several specific social media accounts that are dedicated to producing and launching, new memes. And even the Department of Defense, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, sometimes would share a meme on its Twitter account. And so why are those memes so important? What do they do? So memes appear to serve different purposes depending on the audience they address. And there are three major types of audience they address: the domestic, the Western, and the Russian one. And so for Ukrainians, the memes offer a welcome relief from the harrowing realities of the war, and they definitely lift spirits. For Western audiences, when the Ukrainian memes address them, those memes help to shape the public opinion and perhaps win the support of politicians. And as for the Russians, of course, the memes address them in the context of a social media war, which is a natural continuation of the actual physical war. And so those images are weapons of choice in the internet wars, because, of course, of the way they can command attention on screen, the way they can elicit strong emotions, and also, of course, because they contain humor, which naturally is able to break any barriers. So before we discuss the memes themselves, it is important to define what memes are. What are we talking about? When we hear the word meme, we usually think of something that is repeated often or is shared widely. And this is true, but however, there are some types of viral images that are related to the war that are being shared widely that are not memes. And this slide shows exactly those types of images. When we are talking about memes, what we consider a meme is an internet communication unit that has formal characteristics of an internet meme. And these include the following. So that unit needs to feature an existing or borrowed image or a mimetic text, and that text can be just one word or a phrase, or it can feature a mimetic idea. And second characteristic is that the meme has to modify that image or text or idea in some way by adding a text or an image or both. And the third is humor. So that the meme has to contain humor, and humor is understood here very broadly. It can vary from very light and elegant to really caustic and vulgar and truly dark. And this, let me go back. So what you see here is an example of a very simple, the simplest kind of meme, of the visual meme. When you take a photo from the news, in this case, it's a photograph of Medvedchuk arrested while trying to flee Ukraine, and someone else's face is being superimposed into his face. And in this case, it's Elon Musk. And so what this meme tells us is that Elon Musk really is Putin's ally, just like Medvedchuk. This is an example of verbal of a meme that is an illustration of a verbal meme, a very popular verbal meme, bavovna, which stands for an explosion on the Russian territory caused by the actions of the Ukrainian armed forces. And this is an illustration of a mental meme, actually. And this is one of the more poetic and dark Ukrainian mental memes. Ukrainian dogs, or sometimes foxes, or sometimes other animals, are getting fatter because they're eating corpses of Russian soldiers. And so that's exactly what we see here. So this is a Ukrainian dog. And this is a combination meme which combines both visual and verbal and elements of visual, verbal, and mental memes. So the visual meme here is that Putin sitting in this pose on his chair, sitting oddly and uncomfortably. And then the verbal meme here is "Всё идет по плану," everything goes according to the plan, the Russian propaganda mantra. And then the mental meme here is the Russian tank that's fallen apart. So let's look at the meme templates. And the meme templates is the visual material that is used to build the memes. And so there are three basic types of meme templates that we discovered. There are classic templates, the new ones, and the general category. So the classic meme templates are the meme templates that were developed well before the war. They are well known. They are general internet, classic internet meme templates. In this case, on this illustration, you see the one that's called Distracted Boyfriend, but there are others like Peter Parker Glasses, Roll Safe, Rage Comic, and many others. In this category includes sort of subcategory of film and TV. And that category can be split into Soviet film and TV and non-Soviet film and TV. And we can see that we find that that Soviet film is still very popular on the post-Soviet territory, especially some titles like 17 Moments of Spring or Heart of a Dog, or also we see a lot of memes made from screenshots of from Night Before Christmas, the Soviet adaptation of Gogol's work. And the non-Soviet films, of course, includes the staples like Star Wars, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, many other films, a lot of French movies, actually. So the category of new templates includes templates that have been developed during the full-scale invasion into Ukraine, so since February 24, 2022, and they are based on the images from the news. This is one example, Konashenkov briefing. Of course, Konashenkov is the speaker of the Russian Ministry of Defense, and he keeps telling tales, about the war. And so others include Angelina Jolie and a teenager in a cafe in Lviv, Macron hugging Zelensky, Putin meets with Shoigu and Gerasimov, and many other. And the general meme template category is probably my favorite. Here we have visual material that does not use any ready images, but instead it creates them. So we have various sorts of images used to produce those memes. A lot of photographs, a lot of types of photographs. We see historical photos, war photos, news coverage photos, of course. We see performer publicity photos, for example, and a lot of stock photos. We see memes here that are mimicking some printed sources. For example, a book cover or a magazine cover, a book illustration, a holiday card, a poster, and other things. Some memes are mimicking product branding or military insignia, decorations. Memes are using artwork, they're using maps. Some memes are mimicking infographics or sometimes a screenshot of some non-existing social media post. So now that we've sort of discussed the formal characteristics of a meme, let's talk about the meme subject. So what are memes about? What messages do they transmit? So memes cover a lot of subjects. Basically, any major or minor event of the war can become and probably becomes a subject of a meme. Some elements of the news agenda get a lot of coverage, and then we get a virtual meme explosion. For example, Free the Leopards campaign, or Biden's visit to Kyiv, or the theft of the Kherson raccoon. These were all meme explosions around these events. So describing the meme's subjects is not easy because the coverage is so wide, and the list of subjects in our collection grows constantly. And now we have over 100 subjects, but that number can be, it can grow very easily. I sometimes feel that working with memes, we're working with a force of nature, trying to saddle a wind because of how constantly evolving and fluid this material is. But all these subjects can be fit into several sort of broad categories, and of course one meme can be a part of can belong to several of these categories, but I have arranged them here by popularity, and of course you see that Russia gets the most coverage out of everything, and this is just a list of individual subjects within the category war events, and you can see how different in scale those subject headings are. Some are very general and neutral, and others are really, really specific. And the more specific they are, the more mimetic they get. So I color-coded them, and the blue ones are the general subjects. The yellow ones are the mimetic ideas, and the pink ones are the actual verbal memes. Yes, of course, you see here the Russian warship. Of course, this is something that exists, that should be said in Ukrainian, but in this case, we have the English translation. Chernobyevka and the same Bavovna and things like that. And so it is also interesting to look at, let's see which personalities get featured. So I have here the list of the most popular, the 6 most popular personalities that are featured in our collection. So the collection has over 2,000 memes, and it features 145 personalities. Actually, 4 of them are animals, I should say. And you can see that the 2 presidents are the most popular personalities here, but Putin is a runaway champion. He is featured in almost 500 memes, which is basically a quarter of all our memes. And Zelensky is covered a lot less, just 100 memes to his name. So it's time for me to conclude this conversation, although I could go on and on. But I should say that the memes are definitely part of the information war. And those, funny and creative pictures are actually elements of the societal discourse about the war. They reflect and help to shape and perhaps even build the optics through which the society looks at the events and at itself. And with that in mind, we continue working on the memes. And, being a curator, memes continue to excite me, and they sometimes make me nauseous, but sometimes they take my breath away by their poetry and their imagination, and by the way they use the images and words. But I do hope that the day will come when this constant stream of war memes will stop, and I hope that this day will come very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and if you want to put in a link in the webinar chat to the meme wall, that would be great. Next, I turn over the mic to Charles, and perhaps hoping he'll explore the role of history and in the prominence of humor in Ukraine's current defense. Charles.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, yes.
And it's okay. I can't tell if it's in slideshow mode or not, but I don't think it is.
Not yet, no.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me today. It's a pleasure to speak to this audience, and I look forward to the questions and answers. As Ksenia said, I'm a historian of the Second World War from the perspective of Soviet Central Asia. So this is somewhat of a departure from my usual geography, but I should say that as that project concludes, I am courting a project on a history of World War II through the lens of humor in various settings and languages, in which Ukraine will have to be a critical one because of its importance in World War II. As mentioned, I'm building off of a paper that was published in Slate. So for a more lucid and less filled version, you can go to Slate and read it. But the basic idea of the article and the presentation is that to understand really the prominence of humor in this war, which seems to have become evident literally on the first day with the first lines of the Russian warship, "Go fuck yourself," it seems to me that one can really only understand it through the lens of, or through the legacy of World War II. And so largely what I see as a historian in this war is the way in which, ironically, it's the Ukrainians who are marshaling the Soviet legacy of World War II rather than the Russian side. And so my argument is the following. The Ukrainian state is consciously deploying laughter to define its position on the correct side of a just war. Just like the Soviets did against Nazi Germany. In that war, state-sponsored caricatures and humor were used to solidify a moral argument about the USSR's position and to bridge the ideological divide with its US and British allies. And internally, the Soviets recognized the immense power of laughter to maintain social morale and as a weapon in its own right. So basically, just to summarize what I think the Soviets were doing and what I suspect the Ukrainian state is doing with humor is, first of all, to define a version of a just defensive war through humor. Second, to do that by making it the substance of a bridge to its foreign allies or skeptical or hesitant allies. And third and fourth, because of humor's role in building social morale and cohesion, both at home and among the fighting forces. Of course, contemporary Russia is also trying to build on the legacy of World War II with its steady refrain of calling the Ukrainians Nazis and evoking, the heroism of the Great Patriotic War, the George Ribbons, etc. But they are conspicuously not tapping into the humor legacy of war. My thinking on that is that offensive wars called special military operations do not have the same cathartic and honest resonance and justness. So that's conspicuously absent. Diving into the history just a little bit, we can see that from the very start of the conflict, the Soviet army was very keen to employ laughter. So the Red Army published a very, very wide array of humor magazines and journals, which were widely published and traded at the front, anthologies of soldiers' humor, and I don't know of any equivalent among the other belligerents. They were building on an established framework of official Soviet state humor that in the 1930s was primarily, state-created and rather dark. So Dmitry Moore, the caricaturist, said in 1938, "We don't have laughter for laughter's sake, simple belly laughs, just like we don't have art for art's sake. Here, art and laughter are implements of battle." And of course, in the 1930s, that was an uneasy proposition. the targets of state laughter, were Soviet society, and then the guns were able to be pointed outward, thankfully, in 1941. At the start of the conflict, we see in Crocodile that the Soviet humor magazine or satire magazine, that the war was defined as one about laughter. So in its very first issue after the invasion, on the first page, it wrote, "Murderers do not know how to laugh. Murderers are afraid of laughter. In fascist Germany, laughter is banned."
Charles, are you advancing the slides, or?
I am not, because
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't found reason to. Here we go.
Okay.
We can advance. We can advance. The celebrated poster artist, Kyiv native Boris Yefimov, noted that caricaturists were like snipers. Their job was to, quote, "find his vulnerable funny points, or if they are found and the enemy is made to look funny, the person who laughs at his enemy will become higher than the enemy. He will overcome his fear." I'm glad that Anna went before me with a nice overview of some of the memes of the contemporary war. I think there's a lot of interesting carryovers between them and the Soviet era memes and Soviet era cartoons and visuals. But I detect one difference of character or a qualitative difference that I think is significant, which is the state-sponsored humor to inculcate hatred and revenge. And so we find someone like Ilya Ehrenburg saying, "You don't need to teach the people to hate. I don't think it's possible. However, you can and you must teach disdain. Our people still don't adequately despise the enemy." And so what I think is rather chilling about this idea is, of course, a state-sponsored project to perpetuate a kind of never-ending and endless resentment and vengefulness. Yeah, keep moving along here. The Western Allies immediately picked up on the importance of humor in Soviet society. They were looking and reading at Soviet newspapers. They were publishing Soviet cartoons. They were reciting the contents of cartoons over the radio as being symbolic and symptomatic of the Soviet mood. And so the Soviet state and its caricaturists were aware of this and made explicit efforts to use their humor in public diplomacy. So in this slide, you can see that the caricaturist Boris Yefimov has sent this cartoon to a British humorist, the Sword of Damocles, with the request to have it published, and it was widely published all over England and the Americas. This was part of a building effort to try to pressure the Allies into opening a Western front. And here's another. I don't have the newspaper version of this one, but this is Churchill and his generals. And in the English versions, the generals are translated into people like General No Hurry and General Let's Wait, which I think has some rather unfortunate mirrors with today's efforts to shame and prod the Allies to provide what they've promised. Yeah, and to that effect, the famous TOS windows were brought along on tour as part of Soviet war aid exhibitions in all of these countries. Finally, the Soviets were also convinced that Soviet people were inherently funny. They couldn't talk about Soviet people being funny by blood, because that was, of course, the idea of Nazi racial science. But they were sort of conceived to be funny by history. And of course, where did they look to find the innate Soviet joviality? Ukraine. ironically enough. So at this very interesting Writers Union conference in July 1943, basically all of the leading lights of Soviet letters stopped what they were doing and gathered in Moscow, talked about the role of humor during the war. The keynote address was by the Kievan-born satirist David Zaslavsky. He referred to Gogol's Taras Bulba and the caustic word of the Cossacks taunting on the battlefield. He referred to this painting by the Kharkiv native Ilya Repin, their famously vulgar reply to the Turkish Sultan. And this is an actual postcard from 1944, indicating that this image was very much on people's mind and in circulation. There was a very famous version of the Turkish Sultan's, or a vulgar reply to the Turkish Sultan in the Finnish offensive led by the Baron von Mannerheim in 1941. And more famously, in 1943, the Germans were dropping leaflets in the marshes between Ukraine and Belarus, and a Ukrainian journalist embedded with the partisans made his own version of the vulgar reply. And the final message to Hitler and friends was the following, and excuse my language. Fuck off, clear out of Russia, we say seriously, well, it's not too late. If you don't leave in peace, we'll fill your throats with shit. Goebbels and Ribbentrop will drive a stake up your asses. To you, Hitler, we'll beat you with a club and hang you up by your dick. And I, again, apologize for the language, but I cite it because I think it paints the proper picture of this vengeful style of humor of the Second World War. Here's another example of the sort of the Ukrainian presence, I think, of Soviet war humor. So I know that I'm basically out of time. I just wanted to say that and speaking of Ukraine, one important thing to mention is that the only Republican satirical and humor journal that published almost continuously throughout the Second World War, in addition to Crocodile, was Ukrainian Perets, which gives us a certain indication of the importance of humor, according to the Soviet state, for driving out the Germans. I just wanted to say that in it, the memes that we're familiar with, the postage stamp and things like this. What strikes me as so interesting about them is that so many of them are state-sponsored and state-organized, right? So the Snake Island serviceman was given a state award. The second version of the postage stamp about the warship is bilingual in Ukrainian and English. There are people on YouTube who make exclusive content from the military in English for an international audience. So I wrote the piece last spring, and I was curious what would change in the coming months, and I'm still not sure what what the future holds. But I will say that I think I depict a grimmer tone to state-sponsored humor, one that is less and less inclined to try to distinguish between good and bad Russians, but rather Russians as such. I note that it does not have the dark, vengeful graphic nature of what we see here, and I don't know what the future holds. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. And I've shared to our participants a link to your article, as well as a link to the project that Anna is involved with in Sucho. The image of the Cossacks writing the letter to the Turkish Sultan, I bought for $1 a lithograph in Boston, and I was walking around in a neighborhood, and it was in a window, and it hangs in my office. So it's still continues to be a powerful image. We're gonna, I suspect, change tracks quite considerably. Olha Khometa is next, and I believe we're going to be looking through an analysis of Twitter memes as a tool for Ukrainian resilience. Olha, please.
Thank you, Ksenia, for your warm introduction. And so it's my honor to present today with renowned scholars here. And I would like to say that this presentation is a side project of my scholarly work, but is still very important to me. My presentation is entitled Disempowering the Enemy Through Laughter, Twitter Memes as a Tool of Ukrainian Resistance and Resilience During Russia's War Against Ukraine. I dedicate this presentation to my father, Volodymyr Khometa, who volunteered to join the Ukrainian Defense Forces on the first days of the war and have been serving in Bakhmut for the whole month now. Humor has been playing a prominent role in Ukrainian resistance during Russia's war against Ukraine. Twitter memes are one of the most popular expressions of Ukrainian humor. This presentation explores some types and functions of Ukrainian Twitter memes that disempower the enemy's war efforts through a degrading, excruciating laughter and serve as a morale booster and a coping mechanism for Ukrainians, turning a creeping fear into genuine laughter. Some of these war memes work as a weapon against Russian propaganda, helping in winning the informational war in the West. These memes are created by people themselves and present a form of civil society resistance to Russian campaigns. I will start with a definition of a meme. A meme is an image macro that is a piece of a digital media featuring a picture or artwork with a micro-narrative superimposed. Since the first days of the war, Ukrainian Twitter has been overflowing with memes that immediately reflect on war-related events in a form of a witty, often humorous textual message or a catchphrase superimposed on various kinds of pictures. A good portion of these memes represent Ukrainian war folklore since their authors are unknown, while others appear as an artistic and intellectual craft of designated Twitter channels or specific artists. I could distinguish between two main groups of Twitter memes around the topic of the Russia's war against Ukraine. The memes of the first group usually appear in English, targeting the Western audiences. They contain a clear political message explaining in a nutshell the key war-related events and their implications. Their main function is to create Ukrainian narratives about the war and to counter Russian propaganda in order to win the informational war in the English-speaking world. Memes of this group represent a distinct form of Ukrainian resistance. The grassroots decentralized nature is an important part of their strengths. One of the biggest Twitter channels that produces such memes is Ukrainian Meme Forces. And I'll start sharing my presentation now. The channel's name and meta meme on this slide indicate that it is designed to be an informational weapon against Russian propaganda. The Ukrainian meme forces usually employ pictures of war reality in Ukraine, photos of major political figures and images of Western pop culture and mass entertainment, such as superheroes from popular TV shows and movies like Avengers, Star Wars, The Lord of the Rings, and The Simpsons, to explain in a nutshell an essential meaning and implications of the latest war-related and political events. Their main goal is to create Ukrainian narratives about the enemy and the war, and about the international community's actions in the context of the war. Even though the channel is very prolific in creating original memes, I have time to display and discuss only one of their early war memes today. I wonder if you have a good view of my presentation.
I can see it fine.
Okay, good.
I see two images, yeah.
That's what I need. Thanks. Remember what you are fighting for. This meme refers to the facts of Russian invaders looting and marauding in the occupied towns near Kyiv that came to light after the occupation of Irpin and Bucha in March last year, along with Russia's other war crimes. All sorts of domestic supplies were popular Russian loots from Ukraine. The meme ridicules Russian soldiers' motives to invade Ukraine. The pictures on the soldiers' pendant suggest what is dearest to his heart, namely Putin and the washing machine. This meme highlights 3 facts about Russian invaders pertaining to Russians in general. First, their wholehearted support of Putin and his imperialist regime, which they are carrying out. Second, their pitiable living conditions at home, in which a washing machine appears as the highest price for murdering Ukrainian people. Lastly, the meme portrays Russian values as vividly diverging from shared human morals, suggesting Russians' collective degeneracy. Beside Ukrainian meme forces, there exists an abundance of memes with micro-narratives in English, created by Ukraine's supporters abroad. An example of such meme is Saint Javelin on this slide. Saint Javelin is a social enterprise that fundraises for the needs of Ukrainian defenders by selling their merchandise. Their hallmark is a picture of a Mary Magdalene done in the style of Eastern Orthodox iconography. Her halo is bright red or blue and flanked by the golden trident coat of arms of Ukraine. Her robes are green and she carries a javelin, portable anti-tank missile launcher in her arms, the weapon broadly used by Ukrainian defenders against the Russian military vehicles from the beginning of the war. This is Saint Javelin, a symbol of Ukraine's resistance and military success in the war. The other meme on the slide reinforces Saint Javeliners' liking of advanced weaponry in Ukraine's possession. This time, the HIMARS. The HIMARS is an American multiple rocket launcher delivered to Ukraine to substantially strengthen the Ukrainian army's defensive and counter-offensive efforts. The humor of the meme stems from an extraordinary affectionate treatment and worshipping of this piece of heavy artillery. Both javelins and HIMARS epitomize a strong and consistent military support of the United States and Western community through the war. The meme reads, "Why do we have hands? There are many reasons. Pet the HIMARS, hold the HIMARS, cherish the HIMARS, forfeit all mortal possessions to HIMARS." The memes on the next slide celebrate an international community's remarkable defense of Ukraine against Russian disinformation on Twitter. The slide features a collection of internet memes of cartoon Shiba Inu dogs that represent a global social media movement called NAFO, North Atlantic Fellows Organization, who have gathered to raise money for Ukraine's army and became dedicated to countering Russian propaganda on Twitter. The NAFO movement gained popularity and mainstream attention with a moment in June when they trolled and chased a Russian diplomat, Mikhail Ulyanov, offline for a week. Many of the Ukrainian, European, and American officials shared Fellas avatars celebrating NAFO's successful informational warfare. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense recognized Fellas' outstanding contribution to Ukraine's informational defense on their Twitter. We usually express gratitude to our international partners for the security assistance, but today we want to give shout out to a unique entity, North Atlantic Fellows Organization, on NAFO. Thanks for your fierce fight against Russian propaganda and trolls. We salute you, fellas. NAFO has been viewed as the Western civil society response to Russian campaigns. The second group of memes that I discussed today, and I stop projecting for a moment. The second group of memes that I discussed today represents Ukrainian war folklore and art. These memes are primarily designed for the Ukrainian domestic audiences and demonstrate Ukrainians' remarkable resilience through the war. Such memes usually contain micro-narratives in Ukrainian, lavishing with profanities, which became an indispensable feature of Ukrainian humor and resilience. As a side note here, profanities has been astonishingly normalized in the Ukrainian society since the first hours of the war as an effective tool to express the Ukrainians' genuine attitude toward the enemy and to cope with an overwhelming anger. Inventive profanities in these memes always achieve a comic relief. Such Ukrainian internal memes rely on nuanced cultural references for well-informed domestic audiences. They convey political messages in a frank, forthright manner, disregarding any political correctness. In doing so, internal memes fulfill the function of a coping mechanism by calling things what they actually are for Ukrainians who are surviving through the war themselves. Such memes represents Ukrainians' unembellished attitude toward the enemy. They glorify those who gained people's trust during the war, such as Ukrainian soldiers and leaders of the Ukrainian defense forces. These memes reveal Ukrainians' shared innermost feelings and insights in the course of the war. Most of these memes serve as a morale booster and reflect Ukrainian vision of the Ukraine's history and their war-related desires. These memes are created by people themselves and convey Ukrainians' self-irony, their upbeat spirit and confidence in defeating Russians through enemy excruciating laughter. I selected a few memes that represent some milestones in Ukraine's resistance over the year of the war. And I resume sharing the screen. My presentation wouldn't be complete without this iconic meme about the Ukrainian border guard's legendary response to the attacking Russian missile cruiser, Русский военный корабль иди нахуй, Russian military ship, go fuck yourself. This response instantly became an internet meme and Ukrainians' motto, epitomizing Ukraine's heroic resistance in front of a much stronger military enemy at the first hours of the war. This phrase was later commemorated on a post stamp by the Ukrainian National Postal Service, Ukrposhta, thus reinforcing the symbolic power of Ukrainian resistance and boosting people's morale. The next meme features another common greeting among Ukrainians since the very first days of the war. It reads, "Йобана, блядь, русня, що по русні, русні пизда. Damn Russians. How are Russians doing? Russians are in a deep trouble." The lower case in spelling Russians is to convey the pejorative meaning of the word in Ukrainian. The phrase flows directly from the live stream YouTube channel Frontova Poplava with Taras Chmut. However, in this meme, the profanities and pejoratives are encrypted in the old Church Slavonic fashion by shortening words to a few letters that hint at the phrase instead of writing it down in full. Some Ukrainian Facebook users adopted the trick in order to avoid bans for profanities. This meme's caption reinforces the meme's droll effect by referencing the Ukrainian 17th century scholar and linguist Pampo Berenda, ascribing the profanities about Russians and their bad luck to Berenda's newly found prophetic lexicon. The next meme was produced by the Ukrainian Twitter channel Persha Privatna Memarnya that could be translated as the first private meme makery. On the photo, Serhiy Prytula, the head of Serhiy Prytula Foundation. The text reads, "The urgent donation campaign for the Death Star for the armed forces of the Empire of Ukraine." The meme celebrates a phenomenal fundraising campaign by Prytula's foundation. In 3 days, Serhiy Prytula Charity Fund collected 600 million for 4 Bayraktar drones. Prytula called this gathering People's Bayraktar. Learning that in a few days Ukrainian people collected the required amount, the manufacturer decided to give 3 Bayraktars to Ukrainians for free. After consulting with the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, a decision was made to utilize the raised funds for purchasing a satellite for the defense forces of Ukraine. Having a satellite in Ukraine's own possession means that the Ukrainian defense forces can get any intelligence from the data of the satellite's constellation without permission whenever they want. The meme celebrates an unprecedented fundraising success and the power of Ukrainian civil society by suggesting that Prytula's next successful fundraiser would be for an ultimate weapon from Star Wars movie called the Death Star. The next meme reflects the Ukrainians' daily routine in big cities in the circumstances of the war. On the photo, Volodymyr Zelensky, president last year, and met with Zelensky in Kyiv. Bear Grylls is a British adventurer known for his wilderness survival television series Man vs. Wild. In this meme, President Zelensky tells the survivor Grylls about his typical morning routine. I quote, "Короче, зима нахуй, сніг іде, ракети хуячать, сирена гуде, а я тільки встав і за кохви пиздую." And now goes my translation from Ukrainian slang and profanities to proper English that regretfully eliminates the entire humorous part of the original text. In short, it's winter, snowing, the rockets are flying, sirens are going on, and I just woke up and I'm going for a cup of morning coffee. And the experienced wilderness survivor replies in English, "Nihuya sobi, that stays for both. This is scary and I'm really impressed." The meme highlights how Ukrainians try to preserve their normality of their life in order to cope with the horrifying reality of this war, with constant shellings, daily power outages through the whole winter due to Russians bombing civilian infrastructure. The meme's narrative also hints how normalized the war reality has become for many Ukrainian people living in cities and towns. They continue to carry on with their daily tasks instead of sheltering when sirens are on, thus accepting a risk to be hit by a Russian missile at any moment. And I would like to finish with the two memes that represent Ukrainians' innermost feelings and celebrate their new heroes, the defense forces of Ukraine, and specifically the air defense. On the left, the smaller red cat represents Ukrainians after sirens go off, saying, "Do you know that I love you?" To the bigger, white cat that represents the Ukrainian air defense. The meme on the right features two cats, with bigger one representing the defense forces of Ukraine and the kitten portraying Ukrainian civilians. The very last meme today displays Ukrainians' shared innermost desire that is the fall of Kremlin. The meme reads, "Me beside the fireplace," and shows the burning towers of Kremlin. To conclude, humor has become a symbol of Ukrainian resistance, and memes are an indispensable part of it. Today, I analyzed two major groups. One, memes that are that contain micro-narratives in English and are designed mostly for English-speaking audiences, and those with micro-narratives in Ukrainian, designed for domestic audiences in Ukraine. And the very important thing to keep in mind about the memes that they all are created by people themselves, and this grassroots decentralized nature is a key part of their strength and effectiveness. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olha, and thank you for reminding us that while we are talking about the role of humor in war, that there are people such as your father involved, and you know, this is not to lose sight of the reality of the war. I'm going to now turn over the mic to Olena and Maria. I imagine you've discussed how you will share the presentation, and I believe that you might be talking about how you use memes for teaching purposes, so please. Olena, the mic is yours.
I propose your attention my task for students with which we process enzymes the process of teaching. I want to notice that it's very important to have process studying of meme because it's the tools for the teaching students. A common frame is my proposal to them to make some serials with different collection of memes, Suha memes, and searching of Google. It's some place of collection them, and after that propose them to do some screenshots and to construct an interpretation in the logic and emotional links on this series. The first instrument is Suha collection and the classification of Anna Rakityanskaya proposed. Thanks for Anna. We know thank for her this classification, and it's very popular because it's proposed some to understanding origins of the meme series. In short, the second classification proposed by Ukrainian person, not researcher, she is a journalist, and she have article about the chronological of Aryan memes. It's very important because it's proposed for us not understand only the content of the picture, but of course the events as a reference to which this series can be got live. And my favorite tools is the Vladimir Probe formalism. It's Russian folklorist, not only folklorist, very important expert in humanitarian sphere, and he proposal to understand how differentiate morphology of Shari storytelling and the repeated motif of the series. It can be used from his research field as a charming storyteller to the memes. How it works? I propose some interpretations for the students. It's not on the material of the web memes. I don't want to impose them some certain material, and that's why I take into account, for example, the serials very popular in previous war Syria, and this cat Syria propose some different moment of the differentiation storytelling. For example, this dimension proposed as modification of the text. There are a lot of moments I want to stop, but in the resulting I want to propose your attention some perspective of teaching meme. Very important to understand how constructed Syria, and in this way we need to understand not only visible on the meme area, but what can left out of them. That's why we can differentiate the trauma, culture trauma, and the therapeutic effects of meme, because we can do what they take into account. The second position on what I stop, it's of course the tools of cross-cultural analysis, which allow us to understand this way to produce auditory, what Olga proposed in her research. And of course, the last positions, the most important as for me, it's the tools of cultural analysis, which are very popular from the hand of Lev Manovich, of course, but we have our own points in this understanding. Of course, it's a semantic rules on which you can see on my options. And of course, the next point is the possibility of content analysis, and the most important, programming, because the students, the researchers, not can use only the humanitarian approaches to understanding how meme circulated, but of course in their nature environment need to be produced not an Syria but a follow, and without the tools of programming cannot be understood. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Olena, and Maria, please, over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present my view on memes in teaching. I have to mention that I deal with memes in ethics classes with political students, with political studies students, and linguistics and social communication students of our university. For ethics, memes are interesting for their social value content as a communicational tool. Thus, memes are the occasion to discuss topical, social, and political problems with students. And in the light of this, the following questions are raised in ethics classes with my students. First of all, I mean the memes for domestic audience, as it was mentioned earlier. Memes are created on the basis of significant statements or events. For example, cotton or bavovna, as was mentioned, or Russian war sheep. So they develop definitely widely known images or plots. And thus they capture social moods. At the same way, they can be used to model desired moods. For example, belief in victory in seemingly hopeless moments of war at the beginning especially, or maybe ability to overcome all difficulties of wartime, such a therapeutic function of memes. The second moment I'd like to mention that humor in the space of public policy always plays a significant role. Laughter in politics is incentive for reflection and changes in morals and customs at raises acute social issues. Thou catharsis, very important tool, is used. Through catharsis, vices are corrected and new world of values is created. In wartime, laughter necessarily carries a life-affirming meaning. Since the beginning of full-scale invasion of Russian troops into Ukraine, Ukrainians have become involved in various forms of cultural confrontation and resistance. And one of these became memes practice on the topic of war. After all, by ridiculing the enemy, Ukrainians get a positive experience of interacting with stranger, scaling this image. Memes become a weapon, a means of combating military aggression, and at the same time relieve social tension. But even in Aristotle, we can find a distinction between laughter and mockery, where mockery is a vice. And later on, Baruch Spinoza also spoke of mockery as neglecting something out of fear or hatred. And here comes the question of a measure. Ever since Aristotle, virtue is the measure between two equally negative extremes. Where is the limit beyond which ridicule is excessive? And should the limit be in a life support mood during the war? I mean a series of memes with dead Russians in black bags. There is a special computer program with the help of which different pro-Ukrainian expressions and sentences are generated. We had a discussion with students, and two polar points of view were expressed, pros and cons. Pros, obviously, in the conditions of war, all means rising the fighting spirit of the nation are allowed. Cons is the cultural tradition. We can recall Homer's Iliad, where respect for the corpse of the enemy is discussed and then affirmed in the course of the story. And this is the cultural pattern for Western civilization. In such prospects, black bag memes are ethically questionable. And the next point, there is a question of censorship in the public space, both as the part of the state policy and as a volunteering of public activists. Here we can talk about the culture of vigilance as self-censorship in the society, as a form of horizontal communication and civil mobilization, which ultimately work for the democratization of social and political processes in Ukraine. And the last sentence I would like to mention is that these trends of discussions with students allow to perceive memes as an element of grassroots democracy at the pre-political stage of trust networks, as Charles Steele mentioned it. And this provides opportunities for further theoretical research, as well as for work in classes with political studies students in particular. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for, I think it was really nice to end on your note about the morality of these memes, the black bag memes, and I think that echoes what Charles was saying a bit about the grim turn that these memes can take. But at the same time, if we put them in the context of public, freedom of speech and grassroots democracy, it's this balance. I am monitoring the Q&A, so I invite those who have remained with us for the past hour to put their questions in the Q&A, but I thought maybe before I take the prerogative of chair to ask questions, that perhaps some of you may wish to address questions to one another. So I'll pause for a short few seconds.
Can I ask Anna about your understanding of perspective studying meme? What they say is the most important point of developing this research.
Oh, I'm not sure. I think there are many aspects to the memes that need to be developed. I think, I mean, from my view, I have sort of an archivist's view, because I'm an archivist, I'm archiving memes. And from my point of view, it's very important to add historical information to the memes. You cannot simply archive those memes and hope that, a year from now or even 2 weeks from now, sometimes people would understand what the image stands for, because there is always factual information, the reference information that is tied to this meme. And that reference is both to the event or the idea that it points to, and also to the image, because even the significance of the image sometimes escapes, people who are not familiar with it. So to me, like, this is a problem that I'm working on. But from the point of scholarship, I think the sky is the limit. The memes are so rich, and everything, all the memes. So yeah.
Thank you, Elena and Anna. I see we have a question from one of the members of our audience, Danilo Lashtishin, and it's directed at Charles. You commented on the legacy of Soviet comics on contemporary Ukrainian memes. And Danilo is wondering, have you seen any instances of modern meme makers directly taking inspiration from the Soviet wartime caricatures, drawings, illustrations that you shared with us, apart from cases like Repin's painting?
Thanks for the question. I have been on the lookout for cases like this, of course. I think that the Repin one is probably the most well known. I mean, I may disappoint you in the answer, but I think it may be instructive that well, when I was looking at memes relating to Kharkiv, and I might be able to pull an image up if you give me a couple minutes. But Kharkiv was a city that changed hands during the Second World War, perhaps I was hunting for analogies with the contemporary war. The meme of the partisan, actually the image that I ended with the partisan coming. I don't know if I see the visual, the reproduction of Kukurynytsi or Yefimov, but let's say that certainly the cultural trope of the partisan who is attacking the enemy from behind lines is evident. I don't have a great example of that, but there were leaflets. I'm thinking of leaflets published directed towards the Russian army, which is an unsatisfying answer to your question. I mean, I think that I think only a certain type of person might be, reusing or recycling or be cognizant of specific imagery. But I think that so much of the broader architecture and understanding of the role of humor in the war, and that during a fight for national survival, humor is a tool to be mobilized. I mean, I think that we see that both from the state perspective and the civilian perspective. But I think, of course, it's a very different situation now because there's this massive civil society presence. There's the democratization of tools, memes, etc. So, I think that sort of the dynamic is a very similar one, but a lot of the technology and the imagery is de facto different.
Thank you. I have a question here, which I think perhaps all of you can participate in answering. It's from Ed Schatz, the director of the Center for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies, thanking you for your terrific presentations and remarking on how memes are a particularly powerful form for conveying humor presently, but have they displaced other forms of humor? So, we think of, I know during the Revolution of Dignity and Orange Revolution, there were songs, music. So, I mean, no one has really addressed other forms of humor, such as skits, music, poetry, other forms of narrative. So who would like to take that on, please? Olha, perhaps I can have you comment since you're our.
Thank you. Yes, I was actually going to raise my hand. So yes, that's duly noted indeed. The stand-up comedy, the bomb shelter stand-up comedy became one of the mainstream genres of humor during the war, very popular. So the whole idea of it is that soldiers, men who serve in Ukrainian army, take a break for a day and come to the scene, to the mic, to tell about their experiences in the war as defenders. That's what the bomb shelter comedy is effectively. So I would say that this is probably something that is that became as a distinct phenomena during the war. Other forms, I can't comment much about them. Maybe someone else can.
I connected that memes as a culture practice can take only one look. That's why they so appropriate for the quickly communication. We have no time for long deals in this sphere, and we want to keep balance our world, and that's why it means so easy to use in this internet sphere, and even text in this culture practice processing as an image, not a discursive practice. That's why it's so good, so successful in comparing with other different forms which was producing outline. Thanks.
And I can also add that the memes exist in different forms, not only visual memes, but there are, I mean, they could be accompanied with, it could be audio memes, it could be like Русский военный корабль. TikTok produces meme in motion. So yeah, there are different forms of memes indeed. We worked only with those static ones today.
Thank you. And maybe I will ask Anna. Oh, Charles, please. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer my sense. I mean, I think that the interest in memes is reflective of most of our positions as observers rather than, you know, direct participants in the war. And these are the this is the material that we have available. You know, if the World War II story is at all relevant, I mean, the access to quote unquote real existing frontline humor, of course, could only become available and evident, you know, years later and in often suppressed ways. I mean, there's a whole world of frontline humor that we perhaps don't know a whole lot about. I grant the fact that there's probably, you know, a lot of interface between you know, soldiers serving and memes and meme production, et cetera. But I also would imagine that there's basically a whole ecosystem of war humor that we don't have access to. And I think that it also brings up the question, you know, which is, I think it's an unpleasant, well, it's an uncomfortable question, but I think it has to be asked, which is, you know, who are the memes for, and how do we gauge their effect? I mean, I have no idea about the actual effect of the humor that I, you know, can study as a historian, looking at joke compilations and the you know, and the cartoons sent abroad and all these things. I know that the Soviet state thought it was working because they kept on doing it, and I think that probably the same is true because there's ways in which the state is clearly you know, supporting the humor architecture as well. But you know, I think that there's a question of how you actually study the impact.
Maria, please, you wanted to add something.
Not yet, but I have a question to Anna and Olga. What do you think about transcultural transmitting of memes? I mean, is it possible to comprehend adequately memes, even translated in English, without deep diving into cultural, historical context? Is it possible to transmit them in other culture for therapeutic function, for example?
Olga, you wanna?
Anna, please go first.
Okay. I think it is, no, the question is absolutely correct. It is difficult, but it is being done. And we see some memes, you know, we sometimes see the same meme translated into several languages, sometimes even like 3 versions of it, usually Ukrainian, English, and maybe Russian, maybe some other language, maybe Polish sometimes. So it is being done, and we have no idea who does it and, you know, what audience was it originally intended for, but it's not done for all memes. So definitely there's a layer of memes that could be understood and are directed at others, and then there are others that cannot. And And yes, memes are limited. I think they are limited in that too. So yeah.
Yes, I do agree with Anna's insight about transmitting of memes between cultures. And I can only add that in my own attempts to translate the Ukrainian profanities and slang words into English for this presentation was quite a challenge. There was a collective work of several my fellow scholars and debate if this is actually what the phrase convey, or is it more to it, or anyway. So indeed, lots of memes are not well suited for transmitting them in my case, English-speaking environment.
There's a couple more questions that I have my own questions, but I want to honor the participants who are here with us. One is from Anton Babak about whether memes have played the biggest role in contributing to people's morale after the full-scale invasion versus, I suppose, community activism and helping refugees. I mean, there's so many avenues. So anyone wish to address that question?
I can say a few words. Well, the humor is only one of 50 symbols of Ukraine's resistance, as the newly published book tells us. The book is, I came across of it while preparing for this presentation. It's created by Platforma online business, and it says Ukraine 50 symbols of resistance. And when you scroll through the book, it actually gives you a humor as one of them with an illustration of a meme. So yes, it's only one of the forms, but as you said, there are so many more.
I think a couple of the questions maybe can be handled if the participants want to contact Anna and Olha directly, but I wanted to at least with all of you here online about the question of how successfully this is related to the transcultural transmission, but how well have Ukrainians used humor as a form of diplomacy with governments, let's say, and has there been a change in perception amongst countries outside of Eastern Europe on considering Ukrainians as having a sense of humor, for example? Because I don't. So if you want to comment on those kind of two interrelated questions. Charles, do you want to start?
I'll take a stab. Just to say that I don't think it's possible to really draw direct lines between diplomatic outcomes and memes or any particular memes. But what I think they're all doing is building up a general picture of the the just nature of the conflict. So I mean, in that sense, they're all important. But I don't know if any one of them is important. But I think they interact with a lot of other language about the the veracity of self-defense and civilization standing up for itself in the face of barbarity and all these things. I think that's what I would say about memes and diplomacy. And I think that the issue of memes and and morale is perhaps a little bit smaller and maybe possible to detect, but that would be just a guess.
Okay. So we have 5 minutes remaining. So these two questions are interrelated and they're kind of directed to you, Anna, about how you go about archiving the memes, what information, the metadata that you attribute to the collections for the context. And yeah, I think both Alexander and Natalia's questions are somewhat connected.
Okay, so about the context, we are now working on actually producing sort of a glossary for our memes, and for where all the context information will be actually given in detail, about both the content and the template from where it goes from, where it comes from, because so far there is minimal information. And what you see right now on the Sucho meme, you only see minimal information about the context, simply because there's no space for it, because the meme, the website was designed to work on a mobile device, and so there's simply no space. But we are working. There's a project that we are it's in the works, which will actually address that. The second question, select memes for analysis. I should say again that I do not really analyze memes. I am archiving them. So my task is to archive everything that comes my way. And actually, the collection, the Sucho meme collection, is being collected by crowdsourcing. People are submitting their memes as they see them. And there was even a link at the end of my presentation where it's a Google form through which anyone can submit those memes. So anything, that's that people come across, just be sent, and there is quite a lot of stuff there. So
are you able to capture, Anna, in your metadata analysis kind of the impact, at the point of archiving, number of views or retweets or things like that?
No, we don't do that. No, we don't see that. We don't know that. But I think there are ways. I mean, this is probably the next step, maybe, because there are some attempts of introducing some visual analysis to the collection. It's sort of in the beginning stages, but yes, there are some projects that are trying to look at that. But we do have the source information. It's not displaced, but we know where the memes come from. So it can be done.
And I guess, Olya, you can address, how you went about choosing, for analysis. What guided you? Was it just what you saw, or was it certain types that spoke to you?
Thank you. That's a very valid question. And I should say that my presentation is more kind of an observational one. I'm not trained to work with, so this is my first endeavor into the analysis of visual content like memes. So it was like my first steps into this dimension. So I tried to, like in case with Ukrainian memes for domestic audiences, I chose just 5 that I had time for, that are representative of like some major topics, themes about Ukraine's resistance and resilience through the war, which I myself found key moments and key phenomena of this war. And answering Anton questions about which meme is there a meme that played the biggest role in this war? I would say that probably everyone knows Ruski Kорабль, the reply to Ruski military ship, Russian military ship, and I believe it does have a tremendous impact on the on how the war and the resistance followed after, like, for the past year.
Thank you. And Charles, we have 1 minute left, but I'll let you close, and then I'll thank everyone. Go ahead.
Well, I don't want the final word, but I would just say, in the instance of the Ruski Vayny Kорабль, I mean, is that a meme though? I mean, people heard that. They know that that happened. I mean, it might be being distributed as a meme, but you don't have to classify it as a meme because it actually, I don't think it obeys all the rules of memedom that were defined by Anna, for instance. It is this super powerful cathartic statement. So, I mean, yeah, this is where I wonder about how you gauge and read and measure memes as memes versus memes as, you know, actual phenomena in the world that people can access independent of their status of memes.
Anna, do you want to quickly address that?
Oh, yes. So there are memes of different formats, and this is to me, it's a verbal meme because it doesn't only exist in the context of that particular situation on Zmi in the Ostrov. It became bigger. It became a metaphor for other things, and so it's used in different situations. So it's repeated as memes do. It is repeated, and it gets new sort of facets, new colors every time it is repeated. So yes, and it's just a metaphor. So it's definitely a meme. It's a verbal meme in my in my terminology. So yeah.
So, thank you. We are at close of time. I want to thank Anna Rakityanskaya, Charles Shaw, Olha Khometa, and our special guests, Olana Pavlova and Maria Rohoja, for joining us, and for all of you who were in the audience. Thank you so much.